Good evening and namaskar. This is Shashwat from Azim Premji University, back again with a wonderful, webinar on nature writing for children. This is part of our ongoing series, which has been around since 2020. We are, if I'm not wrong, on the 35th. Yeah, no, 35th. Just 35th webinar of the series where we have this. The whole idea of this nature writing for children webinar is to have conversations with authors, illustrators and publishers to know more about their, the process that they employ in writing these books, and also a way to celebrate these wonderful books. So without much ado, today we have a dynamic duo with us, CG Salamander and Rajiv Eipe. Rajiv Eipe is back. He had joined us sometime earlier for one of our webinar series where we had talked about the book Hello Sun. And CG is, this is his first time with us, and so we hope to he's joining us from Netherlands at the moment. So we are going to have a very nice conversation about this. There's a book specifically right now, the Song of the Asunam, but beyond that, both Rajiv and CG have collaborated on another set of wonderful book called as Maitri and the Minotaur. There's a 3-book series. If I'm not wrong, that's the 3-book I remember, right, Rajiv?
Yeah.
I'm sure there may be 3 more in there.
There are more.
Yeah. Yeah. So without much ado, welcome, on board for this show, and we just dive into our conversation on that. So thank you so much, CG, and thanks so much, Rajiv.
Thanks for having us, Shashwat.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, but before I get into that, CG, first name. What's the story behind the nom de plume? I happen to know you as Andrew, and a large part of but CG is something that's stuck onto you now. Yeah.
Yeah, so stuck on is right because I chose it in my early 20s, and I think it's been about 10 years since I've started writing. So I'm very much married to the name now. But the scientific name of a Chinese giant salamander happens to be Andreas Davidinus, which is very close to my real name, CG Salamander. So sorry, Andrew David. Yeah, I sometimes forget which one is which. So yeah.
So which one do you react more to, Andrew or CG Salamander? If I were to shout somewhere,
It's context because I think I've known Rajiv for more than a decade now. I think we worked on something or the other for more than a decade, and he still calls me Salamander. So, but if my parents start calling me that, I think it'll throw me off. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So, but the good thing is, Rajiv, you have always been Rajiv's. That's
Yeah,
you don't have an alter ego, do you?
No, but in college, like college friends all call me Eipe.
Eipe.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's also good. Good one. So let's just start with the as they say elephant, but in our case it's a Asunam in the room, right? So we'll start with the Asunam, why we have congregated. Tell us about the book, and then we'll just have a round of wonderful queries about that.
I can introduce you to the creature if that helps.
Perfect.
So, according to Sangam mythology or Sangam literature, the Asenam, they were these huge, formidable creatures. They were supposed to have wingspans that were much bigger than eagles and the strength of a dozen horses. And they were these extremely strong creatures that lived in the Nilgiris, I think in the Kurinji Hills, basically. And essentially, even though they were super strong, they had this one weakness to them. And this weakness was that they loved the sound of music. So whenever they would hear the birds chirp or the rustling of the leaves or just, the sound of nature in general, they will leave their nests, come out, and they'll start dancing to the tunes of nature, basically. And what our ancient Tamilians used to do was that they would go into the forest, they would play a lyre to draw out these beasts, and then they would play a loud beat, the loud beat of a drum, which would thoroughly confuse them because they were also very sensitive to loud noises and they were phonophobic. And what this would do was it would cause them to spiral out of the sky and kind of either crash into the earth or basically just stun them and then kill them. And then, this is how they were hunted and then also eaten because they were quite tasty, apparently. So this is sort of the center of the book. This mythical creature lies at the center of the Song of the Asenam, and this kind of its relationship to music and songs is what we explore.
So, coming to you, Rajiv, about bringing that Asunam to life. So, these are the words of CG. What was it, the inspiration that you looked for? How did you design the Asunam? Because this has, if I were to take you just to, show people how Asunam looks, basically, this is how, some of the things. So if you can take us through that thing, Rajiv, talk us through about what was the designing process for you.
Yeah, so I mean, just to start off with, that description is such fertile ground to start drawing with. This like a mishmash, a combination of different creatures. Um it 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 says eagle, right? Like this, the wingspan of an eagle and the neck of a serpent, and um, what else was it? Salamander. What are the other components?
I think I'd mentioned strength of a horse, and
Strength of a horse,
the
and
Sangam
there's a
literature
lion.
itself sort of debates how these creatures looked, and
Yeah.
some cases it was serpent like, some cases it was more of like an animal or a deer, but yeah.
Yeah, but a bird like tendency is quite a strong part of it, and yeah, so to begin with, it was just rough sketches trying to imagine this creature, but because I do a little bit of birding, it was interesting to try out different kinds of birds. Like, is the beak owl like, or is it vulture like, or is it hawk like or kite like? So we tried all of those things. We tried a vulture kind of head with like a bare face, but then feathers coming out near the neck, and all of that was very interesting. um, yeah, eventually we through a lot of iterations and deliberations and conversations, we eventually arrived at this creature that you see in the picture. um, yeah.
So
Um,
let me just budget. How many iterations it must have taken before you finally, kind of arrived at this thing?
Pages, I mean, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 pages filled with different kinds of designs. And then we would shortlist it to a few, like this vulture like head has potential, and maybe the neck should be a bit longer, the wings need to be wide. And then also, some biological mm, questions, like the wings of a bird are adaptations of the front limbs. So to have four limbs and then wings is doesn't mimic anything that you actually see in the wild. So questions of how would that have been possible? We didn't really discuss this, but they would pop up in my head. Yeah, but to answer your question, yeah, a fair number of iterations.
So, so was there a eureka moment kind of a thing where both of you like, oh, this is bingo, this is the one that most suits us after all these things, CG and both of you.
Salamander, I don't think we ever have these eureka moments. It's just okay, fine, let's do this. But
So I'm actually counting 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. 26 drawings is how much you've sent. But I think usually when we start on something, Rajiv sends a number of illustrations of explorations, basically. And there's always one, in certain cases, two that stand out. And we sort of already know that this is the one. And I have a feeling that it's the first one that he draws. And then everything else he draws is kind of like around it. to make sure that his bases are covered. I don't know.
No, that's not true. That's not true. Actually, drawing this exploration of character is one of the most fun processes for me in the making of a book. So, and it's a form of thinking. Actually, this, you're just uh, you're scrambling for. Uh, how do you put it? It's completely subconscious. You're thinking with pencil on a paper basically, and you're trying out different combinations and different inspirations and references and things like that. But it's really a matter of the process itself is so crucial to where you eventually end up. I think because
No,
like
first and foremost, very honestly, I would like to first congratulate you, because typically what happens, uh, you know, India is a fertile land of mythology and stories and all these things. But largely, much of the characters that we have inherited are largely from the epics that are there, and most of the things around you, we tend to dig into those epics and bring them out and play around with them. This is for the first time that something so wonderful has popped out, which was truly, it kind of got you the whole idea of a music loving, and then noise pollution kind of a thing, and the whole character. But I want to bring in Vetri also here, because that is also an essential part of the narrative. If you can just briefly tell us about Vitri and his character, how, because he plays a of course he's the central figure in the story, but there's very interesting evolution of the character that takes over a period of time through the course of the book.
I think
CG, you go
as a
first.
as a character, Vetri was very easy for me because at the heart of it, he wants to sort of belong and wants to be useful to this village. But once he belongs, I think what happens is that he realizes how sort of boring it is to fit in, and then he just wants to go back to what he was basically. And I think this is sort of any child who really wants to sort of fit in, but then the moment they do, they realize, okay, this is not as interesting as I thought it was going to be, and then they make this departure and just go back to however they were. And as a character, uh, a colleague from Pratham Books. He was a Tamil editor at the time. His name is Vetri. And I don't know if Rajiv knew him, but he did have long hair. And actually, he looks very much like the Vetri from the story, basically. So I was also looking for a name that would have been possible, way back when. So it needed to be a Tamil name that was like a pure Tamil name, essentially. And therefore, Vetri.
Yes. And Rajiv, any format that you thought about while designing the bringing Vetri with
actually,
your
no,
pencil?
and in fact, I don't think we had that many different designs for Vetri. He kind of just appeared on the scene as is. He had this shoulder long hair, and uh, yeah, he more or less looked the way he was. The only thing that we did talk about a little when our editor Aparna Kapoor uh, joined the conversation was the kind of clothes that people wear. This story takes place in a uh, presumably prehistoric period. I mean, not prehistoric, but not modern by any means. So. Um, in the initial drawings, he wore a dhoti that was kind of folded in a rather traditional way, and Aparna suggested that perhaps we should change that so that it doesn't feel um, too religion specific. So then we tried out a looser lungi kind of wrap, or a sarong kind of thing, which was interesting. Yeah, but the character himself, he came fully formed. I think it's that character, more than the contours of his shape. It's about how it's about his his mental thing, how he will run towards a beast instead of running away, and to put him hanging down next to a bat, or imitating a mantis. Those are the things that kind of define him more than the the shape of his nose or ears or whatever. So and very interesting for me to draw stuff like that. uh,
Yes, and one thing that how does the collaboration between you, CG, and Rajiv works? How do you work it out? Because there's also a designing background to your work as well, CG, right? So what is the uh, how does the duo work, the JVru combination of this thing?
I think right now I'm at this comfortable stage where I'm not really questioning it, because something I tell myself also when I write these scripts is, oh yeah, Rajiv just knows what to do in this particular case, and it's actually true. But sometimes there's this tendency to request the impossible from Rajiv, and I think he more or less 100% delivers on it, because we talk about, with the next book, we actually just got off a call with our editor Aparna, and we were talking about the next creature in the series, and how it's huge, huge, colossal beast. And there's always sort of the challenge of bringing in like a smaller human, and then something that towers over people, and how do we do this. And um, so we just sort of discuss how best to do it, what kind of tools best work. And I think in this instance, I think Rajiv mentioned foregrounding the character and then backgrounding the others. And then we also discussed using the comic format, so an inset panel to show emotions of the character wherever necessary. So but honestly, I think it's a language, more or less. And since we've been working together for so long, it's evolved, and we also learn from what works and what does not work. And I can comfortably say that, okay, this is what we need to do, and then also give Rajiv some extra pages, uh, so that he can play around and do, and just have that space to make the illustrations work. So in with these books, it's not very rigid, it's very loose, it flows together perfectly. And then in a Maithili, it's a little less so. So it just really depends on what we do, and which book it is. I don't know, what do you think, Rajiv?
Yeah, I think when you say it's evolved, to make that clear for the audience, initially when Salamander would write scripts, they would be super detailed. So there would be panel breakdowns, and like 2000 words describing each panel, how in the top 20% of the panel this is happening, and then in the middle 30% this is happening, and then at the bottom 20, 30, 50% this is happening. And as we've worked together, I think not that there's anything wrong with that, but yeah, it's become, like he said, a bit looser. So because and also there is we have figured out a way where there's a script, and then there's a response to that script in the form of very rough thumbnails, and then we put the two together, and some gases come out of that mixture, and then we can take a look at the story as a reader, and then go back to the script if required, and change some drawings if required. It's become more collaborative and back and forth, I think, over time, which is
Yeah.
exciting for me. I don't know about Salamander. Maybe
No,
it's
no,
more about
100%,
drawing.
because I think that back and forth, or just my the best part for me is when the thumbnails come, and when the super rough thumbnails come in, and then that's when you can actually see if it all makes sense, if it all works. And then that's where I'll say, okay, maybe we go back and rewrite the ending, or we rewrite this particular chapter. And this is more with the Maithili books than the Lost Creature picture books.
I
And
think it's a more
once,
intuitive way of working also, it feels more natural and organic to be able to,
yeah,
otherwise it's a bit rigid, this is the script and then these are the illustrations and then it's over with a few edits at the end. This feels more natural and the story is always at the center, is always the hero that you're trying to hold up. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And
So do you ever have contradictions over things between yourself, and how do you resolve that between the two of you? Because this is not a typical writer and the publisher has found the illustrator kind of a relationship, right? It's a you're a partnership which has been going on for a long. So yeah.
I'm basically Salamander's slave. I
no,
do
that's
whatever
that's not true at all. I think you made me rewrite the ending for one of the Maitlis.
no, that's
I
fine.
don't know if it's the second or the third book, I think. And I went and rewrote the entire thing because I think it's also picking up on those cues because uh, I always ask Rajiv, okay, case in point, to call that we just had, I said, hey, is everything okay? I always ask, okay, is it better than the previous book? Because, it's good to benchmark it and kind of make it better and better. I said, oh, yeah, everything's okay, everything's okay. And I asked him again, oh, is everything okay? And I said, yeah, oh, it's perfect, it's beautiful. Then the third time I was like, did anything jump out? He was like, no, nothing. Wait 10 seconds. And then he said, actually, this and this. And then, you go back and then you work on it. And I think when we get to that thumbnail stage is where I can also sort of see that, if the illustrations are able to visually sort of depict a lot of things, then the text is no longer required. So you go back and cut those down. And that's when it becomes more kind of cohesive and goes really well together. So, uh, yeah, but I don't think we have major disagreements about characters and
Yeah, not
books.
really. Yeah,
It's just very
Yeah.
small things that
not yet.
nobody would care about. Yeah,
Not really. No, I doubt it. If you have survived so long, a decade or so, I think so. It's hardly. It's more of. It's almost like a marriage now.
Yeah, it's like a marriage.
definitely is, I think. Yeah, and you also have to
Yeah.
keep
So
doing
how
new
did this
things to
start?
keep
How
the
did this
algorithm
collaboration
interest.
between the two of you start? If you could just
How did we get
quickly.
married?
Yes. How did
Salamander
you fall
proposed
in
to
love?
me in
Let me know.
2014.
Our We were introduced by our editor Dilip. I think the first one we did was
Arranged
a
marriage,
month comic or something. Yeah.
matchmaker.
Huh?
Sorry,
Uh,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, I think Dilip introduced us, and we did these smaller comics as part of Big Picture or Small Picture at the time.
Work.
And then I think we just sort of worked on a few small things here and there. And then I think Maithili and a Minotaur we started working on in the capacity of like one-page comics. It was supposed to be something like Peanuts or Calvin and Hobbes, just these one-page comics. The characters will come, they'll do their thing, they'll say their lines, make their jokes, and then they'll go away. But then this sort of started building into something much bigger. And as this happened, it felt that they needed more room, and therefore this one-page comic became a two-page comic, three-page, and then 4 pages. And it was published at a children's magazine called Jellyfish Monthly that I was doing at the time, basically. And once all of this sort of came together, there was like a rough story arc. And when we went to Penguin with this as a book, we just told ourselves, let's fill in the gaps. And then that's how the first book came to be. So the first book in its offering is very different from the second, which is where, we start working together. It's still a bit uh, I script, Rajiv writes, there's a bit of back and forth. The third one is where I think we're kind of like coming into our own in terms of this is exactly how this works. Now let's try to make it better in some capacity. So I think it very much is like a marriage where you just sort of keep working on it or something. Oh God, so cheesy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rajiv, your comments on this marriage?
Uh, Actually, I'm
how does
getting
this
a bit
marriage work?
uncomfortable with calling it a marriage because that means the books are children and
No, please don't read into it, man.
editors are midwives,
Yeah.
publishers are hospitals. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
मुबारक हो
yeah.
आपको बच्चा हुआ है.
Publishers are prenuptial agreements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, what to say? We've worked on, like Salamander said, short comics for newspapers, and then that became these short Maithilis, and then that became books, and then a couple of other chapter books that Salamander has with Penguin called Nisha Small. I've illustrated. I don't know. I don't know how this came to be, but it came to be, and it's been fun. Yeah, I really enjoy
So
the
Rajiv,
kind of
quickly,
writing that he does. Yeah.
I have one query. You have also you do independent thing. Chitty was there. Hello Sun is there. How is it working by yourself and having CG with you? The difference between the being a
Uh,
solo and a rock band kind of a band member kind of thing.
so the books that I've written and illustrated, they're generally much smaller. I'm not a very confident storyteller, so it working on these kind of the Maithilis and the lost creature storybooks like Asunam, they're much more grand in their scope and vision and storytelling, and it takes a lot of pressure off me that there's a accomplished writer at the helm, taking taking care of those concerns. uh, that allows me to focus on the imagery and the art and the character designs and stuff like that, which is uh, which is exciting. And because I a part of my brain is not wholly focused on things like seeing the larger picture or the writing or the grammar and things like that, I get to, I think, spend a little more time and explore the imagery a little bit more, which is nice. It's a welcome. It's different, but it's a nice welcome change for me.
Wonderful.
In the time that I'm working on these Maithilis and Asunam books, there's no mental space for me for much else, to be honest, because it's a lot. It's a lot of pages, and it's a lot of panels, and it's a lot of work, like labor.
So if I were to just ask you quickly, the Asunam book, when did you start? How much time did it take you? You know, the whole process. How did it come across here?
Salamander, it's actually hard to say because it began a long time back as just an idea without a publisher or a. When did we start Salamander? I think
I think
20 or
officially
21 or.
IFA grant. So Indian Foundation for the Arts had an exploration grant where initially the idea was to look at these lesser known mythical creatures, so non-Vedic in particular, and
Okay.
mostly coming out of, say, literary traditions or oral, stories, etc. And the idea was to take this and spin a contemporary-ish tale around it, basically. And I think we received the grant, and it was an exploration grant, so which is why we did a lot of like I think we had a version of the book
Yeah,
because
very
uh,
rough.
uh, yeah, because my wife, when I told her that okay, Asunam is out like 2-3 months ago, she said, "Oh, I thought it's been out for like 3 years," because there was a binded copy that you sent me at some point, the
Yeah,
spiral binded one, and that was sitting at home for the longest time for like two years or something like that. So we started quite a while back, and
yeah.
then
Yeah, and then we worked on other stuff, and then we pitched it, and then it got sort of accepted by HarperCollins about a year ago, and then became there was an editor on board, and we made a few changes. But after that, I'd say it took us about it took me about 4 months of work to actually make the final images, and then yeah, a few changes and stuff, and went off to print.
Wonderful. CG, if I were to ask you, one of the most, I say, in the publishing industry and for the larger audience, I'm talking about, underrated role is that of the editor. As an author, as a writer, what do you think about the role of the editors, and what value add they bring to books like these?
So I think the saying is that like how does it go? A bad editor is no editor is better than a bad editor is how it goes. And fortunately for us, we've had the opportunity to work with a lot of good editors. And with Maitli, for example, we work with Smith, and she's been
Correct.
on board for the first three books, and she's also now working on the fourth book with us. And it it makes sense because she's no longer with Penguin, but since she's sort of been with us for all these years, she understands the story, she understands the development, and so with Maithili book four, I've been making rewrites essentially before Rajiv can step in now, and I foresee maybe another round of rewrites towards the end because I'm not too confident about it yet. And we'll know about this soon. But I think a good editor saves you a lot of time and helps you from embarrassing yourself, essentially. And they're your first reader. So they also, I like the editors that say this doesn't make sense. And, very small edits doesn't need to, talk around it and say, oh, this is really nice, but this. So I think I'm at this point with my editors where they just say, okay, this doesn't work. This shouldn't be like this. And it's nice to be at that point where you can get to the heart of it and deal with it really quickly. So, but yeah, I stick to my thing of bad editors
Mm.
being worse than no editors.
Can I take just 1 second? The journalist in me is wanting to do a breaking news. The fourth edition of Petli and the Minotaur is coming very soon, hopefully sooner than we think. And this especially goes out for my young son who wanted me to ask this question to both of you. When is the next Minotaur coming in?
Yeah, soon, soon.
Yeah.
So
So let me just get your books, both Minotaur series and Asunam also have a very uh, you know visual feeling to them. How would it be if they were turned into, say, something like a teleseries or something like that for OTT these days?
That's interesting. Um, uh, it would be exciting, I guess, but it's a lot of work actually. I feel to adapt it from a comic book to it would have to be an animated television series.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
why do you ask?
So yeah, yeah. So we will just another announcement for anyone wanting. They can reach out to both of you for for it would be a great idea.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
interesting.
I think
Yes.
there was
But for now, we
some,
are seeing it as comics. I feel
yeah, yeah.
they we're kind of married to the idea of them being comics. It would be interesting. Yeah, a lot of work in animation too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Salamander, I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say someone at some point brought, the idea of this at a very sort of early conversation animation thing, but I think maybe they were not that serious. But we built castles in the sky, and when we had this discussion, I think we said, no, it should be the book first because the whole story needs to come out and it needs to finish before you can actually think of a different format because that will push and pull in a different direction, and the freedom to sort of do this is paramount. um
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, to me, especially each of these books, like the making the art for each of these books feels like a small mountain to climb, and to then go off into an animated series adaptation feels like, uh,
And
a
Everest.
different range, different mountain range altogether.
No, no. No, first and foremost, indeed, your books are almost like a piece of art. They are, they are story books, but yes, they're very beautifully produced and visually very rich. So coming back to the main nature theme that we have, right? So I'll just pull up one of the slides of this magical book. If you can just tell us the whole idea of this is the nature writing for children webinar series. How important does including bits about nature into these children books? What do you feel about? And you have been doing this, I don't know, rather for the past very, very many years, both of you. So how does it work actually? How do you think about the natural aspects? What are the things that you ingrain? Is it the story that comes first, and then nature is an afterthought, or how does it work? I'm just curious.
I mean, if I'm being brutally honest with you, nature was very much an afterthought here. But if you kind of go back to the original myth where you have this creature that's being hunted, and it loves the sound of music, it loves listening to the sound of nature, etc. It's kind of ingrained in the original mythology, so it becomes very difficult to separate it from that. But I think what really lends this book to the nature element is Rajiv and his input on, and all his obsessive birding, basically, because ultimately when you flip through the pages and look at the scenery, even though this world is meant to sort of alienate in some capacity, it's supposed to be some sort of an older, more fantastical world. It's very familiar. It looks very similar to the kind of um, nature that we've seen, and the way these birds react. It's all very familiar because of what Rajiv brings to the table. And you can see this all the way from the character explorations till the finals, where he does sometimes, ask himself, like, how does the bird eat, for example. So that's my favorite drawing from this book, where you see the Asunam eating, and he's, and I think he just, when we were talking, he went like this. I think it eats like this, and then that gives you like, so you just know how it's going to come.
I'll
So
just one
yeah.
second, Rajiv. I'll put you on. Yeah, yeah. This one. Yes. Yeah. Wonderfully.
Yeah,
Yes.
over to you, Rajiv.
Um, so actually, I was thinking about this earlier, about this environmental or nature aspect. If you think about it, the origins of these creatures in early writing or mythology, I think this is the work of naturalists trying to describe species that exist. If you there's a salamander, there's the beast called the karkadam. Is that right in Iranian
Yeah.
and Indian mythology, which is like a weird creature with a horn, and it's the same name for a rhinoceros and a unicorn. Um, and there's a side story of how if you touch that horn, you get diarrhea and things like that, which is great fun and interesting. But but you can totally imagine somebody. A traveler in an ancient world seeing a rhinoceros and then thinking, oh man, this is like an elephant, but instead of a trunk, it's got this horn, and like building a whole mythology around it. So if you think about it, the original sources themselves are rich with this environmentalism. Yeah, but other than that, when I'm interpreting the text into images, I'm leaning into my own experiences. The the forest park that I go for a walk sometimes on weekends, that finds its way into all my work, Hello Sun, or any of the other books, but also these books, and the birds that I sometimes see, and the trees that I walk past, they find their way into the work. So um,
On in this panel, for instance,
yeah.
Rajiv, which are the birds that are there?
There's a bulbul, but there are a couple of there's a red whiskered bulbul on the left, but there's also a weird bird that's sort of a mixture of hupu and shama, or what is the other one that you find in the western?
And on the right side, right bottom panel, there's
Yeah,
a
that's the
frog.
blue-eyed or yellow-eyed tree frog we saw in Agumbe once. So I mean, when I go to some places, I'll take really bad photographs on my phone, and that all forms a database. Besides the stuff that I see and don't take pictures of, it becomes sort of a database to lean on, or to take inputs from in situations like this. So um, none of this is in the text, but it builds the environment of a deep, mystical, rich with life kind of forest. Um, yeah.
So there's this very important conversation that keeps happening nowadays about the nature deficit disorder, right? A lot of, especially the kids today, even countries like India are rapidly urbanizing, almost 50%, right? There's a very little nature that is around us. In these times, how do you think it's important for books, especially story books, to bring that connection back with nature? In your perspective, I just wanted to quick, both of yours.
Salamander, you want to go?
Um, I've always liked the idea of a very simple sort of book that captures something that is, it sort of puts its pulse on, well, not a forgotten time, but something that is, so ubiquitous, like playing on the street, for example. Going to sound ancient, but when I was growing up, there were trees around my house, and we would climb on those trees, and there were a lot of chameleons that would run around, and skinks, and you don't really see them as much now, as well as snakes, actually, because we they would also sometimes enter the house. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's weird that we've reached a point where this is sort of nostalgia rather than something that should have sort of continued. But then again, when we talk about this in particular, it's more of an urban problem than it is for the rest of India, where the ground reality is that they can access nature quite easily. So I guess, how does one deal with, like a concrete jungle like Bangalore and nature, and maybe books. Yeah, it's challenging. I don't really think like you could bring back the nature into a city, unless it's sort of like it dismantles it to a certain extent, and then it enters the realm of fantasy, or enters the realm of dystopia, or reclaiming by nature. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what Rajiv thinks about this.
I also think that, beyond a point, you can't be too didactic about this, and say that, we must live in harmony in nature. That's just going to turn a reader or a child away from it. And maybe even, like Salamander said, this fantasy element of this could well have been a story about a boy who comes across, let's say, a snake, or a bird, and nurses it back to health and takes it back to its home. But something about, you know taking it one step further and making it a mythical beast, perhaps, by distancing itself from the real world, it communicates that we are seeing we're actually seeing the world of the animal through this protagonist Vetri's eyes. So we become naturalists in traveling with him on this journey. So uh, yeah, I think storytelling and couching stuff in strong narratives that are just exciting on the face of it, but then have this maybe an underlying layer of conservation or environmentalism underneath is
Yeah. So
seems
I
to me
my
like a
yeah, my quick
good
question to
approach.
you there would be, how do you resist the urge? And because the kind of environmental things that are happening all around us, and I'm sure you are more attuned to it than a lot many others. How do you resist the temptation to kind of, drill into a, say, a message which has a strong connect or
Mm.
commentary that you pass through that? Is there an effort that you kind of that the the messaging should defer to the storytelling, or how is it? I'm just curious about that.
I think the conventional wisdom in publishing is that everything should defer to storytelling, and it's a more effective way. But you know, uh, and Salamander can come in, but you should also take into account that we may not know what we are doing as as creators. We are just doing some stuff and putting a book out there. It's interesting. We never know what works and what won't work. Um, yeah
Yeah, I think in a way we're sort of like servants of the story, and then the story just needs to be told or wants to be told, and then it's out there and it's for what people want to make of it. But going back to the whole urban environment, actually Rajiv has done something. You've done Pishy and Me, which is a perfect sort of encapsulation of what we just spoke about, because it's this kid, wide angle lenses, interacts with limited nature in that sort of urban landscape. There's dogs, there's crows, there's birds, there's things around him. So I guess that's like that's a wonderful way of looking at how nature and the urban space interact, because you still have birds visiting, you still have um, sort of that encroachment of like animals coming in, and yeah. So I
this
just
is
wanted
No,
to.
PNE by Timira Gupta, published by Pratham Books, that I only
yeah.
illustrate.
Your Hello Son also has a very interesting that narrative, right? He steps out after the rain and he's discovering, oh, that
So
is also.
I think that the editor for that was Bijal, and we have had conversations about this where a lot of nature writing can tend to be, and it's natural to tend to be, look, we're in dire straits and we need to do something, which is useful in its own way. But I think in the case of Hello Sun, the conversation was to just have unfettered joy and astonishment and delight, for sheer delight for small natural spaces, not like like you don't have to be inside a jungle. You can delight in the small stuff around you, and I genuinely think that that's really important. And there are those possibilities, as much as we crib about how terrible things are going in general. There is still the space to have those experiences and to be attuned to those things. And like a boy like Vetri equally sort of represents that spirit, I'd say.
Yeah, and this is, I think, so where your books do magical thing, because they help the young reader kind of explore that world, be aware and sensitive to that thing around us. Now finally we move on to our last final stretch. This is where I wanted both of your comments. How do you, for prospective writers who want to do these kind of books, can you the critical question is, can you make a living out of doing just these kind of books, and how do you manage that between yourself? Rajiv, you first this time.
So I think most people have some sort of day job, or um, I, writers for sure. I think do something else, or this is not their only source of income, or they don't need an income. And for artists, it's a little harder because it's more time. You need to uh, devote more time. It takes longer to draw an 88-page comic book, so it's hard to do this on the side of other things. Uh, but to answer your question, is not very sustainable. I don't think there's a easy way to put it. You have to have another plan, or savings, or uh,
Yeah,
something.
yeah. CG.
I have a very long-winded answer for this, and I'm going to try to make it short. So I
No, no,
think
you can go long.
when I decided that I wanted to write, I told myself, let's try to sustain myself doing something else. And I said, okay, I'll become a tour guide. And then I became a tour guide, and I told myself, once the writing makes as much money, then I'll actually stop. So at that moment in time, let's say 10, 11 years back, I needed 15,000 rupees to survive in Chennai, in the outskirts. And that happened, I think, in a let's say in 1 year or so. I was able to make that with my writing, and then it got better and better and better. And then at one point, I realized that the kind of writing I was doing to make money was like, commercial stuff, which isn't necessarily fun for me. So then you enter your next stage, which is, okay, so this is the kind of writing that's fun, but you have to do all of this other stuff that's not really fun to make this work. And by the time I had sort of left India, I think I I, I could make as much as what my peers in IT were making, but then it was not sustainable at all, actually, because in retrospect I would never want to do that, because it was a lot of talking about, it was a lot of writing for uh World Bank of India, stuff like that, basically that will pay the bills. And at the end of the day, that's not a lot of fun. And then you also have to, like, keep track of the money. You need to make sure that people pay you, and that was one of the biggest hassles, the whole admin of it all, writing and then getting them to pay you. And when I moved to the Netherlands, we have a 4-day work week here, and I realized that it's so much more sustainable to write. Like my writing input output has exploded by having a day job, because in my 20s I was able to do a lot of this, and now I can't think of wearing all these hats and putting pictures out there, applying for grants, and then also trying to get money come to me with admin. So the long answer is, it might be sustainable in your 20s, but it's definitely not sustainable post that, unless you break out as a big sort of star writer or something. But just based on royalties and money that will come from the kind of fun writing you do, I can put a number on it. I can say you can make around 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs a year, and that's not going to be enough to live in a Bangalore, or maybe Chennai. You can still make that work in the outskirts, but once your 30s hit, it becomes more terrifying. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer.
Yeah, but
That's
also to add to that, we are all under the delusion that that this next book
Yeah.
is just going to explode, and then we are all going to be buying our own boats and sailing across
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Mediterranean and things like
But I think
that.
we've lowered our standards. We've the way we talk about it now is that we're putting all this money into a bad pension plan, and that the royalty will hit us when we are like 60, 62-ish, and hopefully some money comes out of it. If not, some pension fund has lost all your money. So that's how we're looking at it
yeah.
right now.
The OTT thing is still there. I remember, so you'll get loads of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Also, the The we started with a yacht, and then that got downgraded to a
Yeah.
smaller boat, and currently it's like a small rowing boat, like a two-seater rowing boat.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, you're rowing your boat gently down the sea, I guess. So that's very good.
Stream.
Look, just one final thing. How has the response to your books? Kind of what if you were to just tell me some of the surprising? I know a lot of there must be a lot of responses to the Minotaur series, but Maitli and the Minotaur, and how has that been from? And what has been some of those things that stood out for you?
My favorite responses, and I shared them with Rajiv as well, are these very rude messages that we get from kids who presumably are using their parents' phone. And it would be something along the lines of, when is the next Maitland mentor, or what's taking so long, or why is it not here? It's almost as though it's like 1 year is way too much time. You should be able to do this in 2 or 3 months. And I think I really like that, because I feel like it's very sincere. And I I think another thing that we're doing right now is that we're doing a lot of other books. So we have the Nisha small ones, and then possibly another set of books. And the idea is also to kind of like even out the workload, where with some books it will make more sense for me to do that, and you get like a different kind of response for each of these. With the Nisha small ones, it's not as like when is the next one out, but it's more along the lines of, I really like the story. It was like it was a nice mystery, etc. So it really depends on the child. And yeah. And Sorry, I was going to say
Oh,
also that when we were signing books in Neve, I think we ended up signing for an hour straight, or something like that. So that was also nice. But yeah.
yeah. Rajiv, you must be having. He's safely ensconced in the Netherlands. You have more, direct connect to the ground.
Yeah, but I'm fairly reclusive. But actually, it's such a mystery to me. How anyone actually responds to a book. But like Salamander was saying, these entitled comments that say, "Hey, where's the book? Why is it not out yet?" is actually the most sincere uh, sort of commentary, because it there's clearly some interest in the next book, and I think that's very satisfying. That feels very satisfying. Yeah, I can't think of any specific feedback on the books other than that. um, yeah, but that feels nice, like this anticipation for the next book is
No, I can relate to that. I told you. Remember,
yeah, that's
my son literally forced me to message him when is the the
yes,
next one coming out. So
yes.
yeah, I can. So now, final a bit about here is from both of you. Uh, Tips, tricks, and word of wisdom for our for people who want to jump into the fray, the bandwagon of nature writing, and what is it that you would like to tell them? Rajiv, first with you, and CJ next. You.
Uh, for me, a couple of things. For me, I think one thing that helps is to actually try and use the things around you, the things that you see, the things that you hear in real life, to try and incorporate that into imagery or writing or art or whatever. That's a good way, both of making the art that you make more authentic, but also how you live your life. Then you're more attuned to your surroundings, and you're more observant, and hopefully more empathetic. And eventually, if you think about it, environmentalism is about empathy, right? If you're able to see something from even an insect's point of view, then you're already a naturalist or an environmentalist. You don't have to have a title against your name. So yeah, so that in short is. advice.
That's your word of advice. Yours, CG.
For me is to sort of prioritize joy and freedom. And joy for me is when we work on these books, we also riff off of each other. So Nagesh as a character became the character that he's supposed to be because Rajiv drew him out in a classroom full of children. It just kind of popped out, and then you take that out and you say, okay, I'm going to turn this into this, and then it's just a fun conversation where we just make fun of each other. Oh, what will Nagesh do if we do here? Riff off each other, and at the heart of it, of the story, is to just have that joy and really kind of like what you do. If it sounds like work, if it feels like that you don't want to do this, I think you're doing it wrong. And the second one is have the freedom to tell the sort of stories that you want to tell, and not to limit yourself, and just be true to that feeling of absolute fun, as well as that feeling of being able to be true to yourself and tell the stories because you want the stories told, or because the story needs you to tell it in a particular way, as opposed to what your editor wants, or what the publisher wants from you, rather. And I think, yeah, to summarize, it would just be sort of staying true to those two things.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think so that kind of brings us to a very interesting end to our conversation. As with a very nice, we discussed the married couple, that arranged married couple, that we, the duo of the Minotaurs and the Asunams. So thank you so much, Rajiv. Thank you so much, CG, for sharing your time and most importantly your thoughts with us. I'm sure a lot of people who have listened to it and who would eventually go through our conversation will be truly enriched by this very interesting session. So yeah, it was fun. Thank you so much about that.
Thanks, Shashwat.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and so just a small bit of announcement. The next uh, for our next webinar, we have a very special guest. It will be MG Leonard, who will be joining us for a talk about the Beetle Boy and the Twitch series of. So yes, we look forward to join us on June 11th, and we'll keep you posted for more updates. On that note, thank you everyone, and we'll see you again. Bye bye.